Go the Distance, Chapter 1, In Thin Air. Present day. The view was spectacular. That was Meg's first thought as Wonder Boy lifted her into his arms, and a cloud carried the two of them into the air, high above the city of Thebes. The second? Don't look down. She wouldn't let her fear of heights ruin this moment. Hercules was beside her, his body awash in a golden glow that burned like the sun. Meg knew just from looking at him that he had finished his quest. Wonder Boy was now a god, and she was... What was she exactly? Was she even alive? In the last few years, Meg had been to hell and back, literally. She'd sold her soul to the god of the underworld and spent her days and nights fulfilling Hades' every demand. While she still walked in the land of the living, her life was no longer her own. Meeting Hercules had awoken something in her. Honestly, she wasn't sure what that something was, but she knew it felt important. Why else would she have leapt in front of a falling pillar to save him, causing her own demise in the process? That moment, and Wonder Boy's rescue of her afterward, was a blur now. Like so many nightmares she tried hard to forget. The next thing she remembered was air filling her lungs as if she held her breath underwater for too long. Then there had been a crack of lightning, a flurry of clouds, and she and Wonder Boy were being whisked into the heavens towards Mount Olympus. The city sat on a bed of clouds that shone like the sun burning brightly behind it. The majestic home of the gods rose high in the sky, with peaks of clouds holding various buildings and waterfalls. As their cloud came to the stop in front of the massive staircase that led to Mount Olympus' pearly gates, Meg could hear cheering. Lined up on either side of the staircase, every god of Olympus was on hand to congratulate Wonder Boy. 3 cheers for the mighty Hercules, they shouted, as they threw flowers and blew kisses of gratitude into the air. At that moment, Pegasus landed on a nearby cloud with Phil. The satyr caught a yellow flower in midair and began to chew happily as he surveyed the celebration. "You did it, kid," Phil shouted. "Can you believe this, Meg?" Hercules said in wonder. "They're cheering for me." "You deserve it," she said warmly, because he did. But something was suddenly gnawing at her. The fact that Phil was here made sense. He trained Wonder Boy on Earth, helping him achieve true hero status. But how had she gotten a front row seat to this party? Her association with Hades and doing his bidding had almost cost Hercules this moment. Did these gods realize the woman standing beside their newly anointed god had almost derailed his dream? "Meg?" She looked up. Hercules was offering her his hand. At some point she must have stopped walking because she was standing still as the cloud swayed slightly. "Are you coming?" Meg hesitated, looking from him to the crowd of the admirers, and those huge steps to the Mount Olympus gates. Her thoughts were coming fast, and not all of them were pretty. Wonder Boy might have wanted her here, but it was clear a mortal didn't belong among the deities of Mount Olympus. Hercules was a god now. Where did that leave the two of them? Mortals weren't allowed to date gods, were they? Was this the last time she'd ever see him? If it was, she was just standing there, totally blowing it. She wasn't saying any of the things she wanted to say. Which were what, exactly? Well, there was the way he made her appreciate things in life she had never seen before. Fragrant lilies in bloom. The way a kid in the market smiled. He had a contagious optimism that filled her with her newfound energy. There were also those stolen moments between Hercules' hero trainings and triumphs and Meg's awful meetings with Hades. The two of them would stroll along the garden, talking for as long as they could. They could not get enough of one another, drinking in each other's thoughts and observations like parched farmers reaching for brimming wells. Hercules brushing her hair out of her eyes, Meg teasing him, making his ears redden so adorably. They had even challenged one another to see such vastly different points of view, to expand their worlds far beyond the reach of Mount Olympus and the underworld. Those moments had just been for them. Or were they? Did the gods know about all the time they'd spent together? Did they care? Okay. So it was clear there was a lot to unpack there, and Meg had no clue what the newly minted god in front of her was thinking. That's what she really wanted to know. But how did she ask Wonder Boy what he wanted when this was the moment he had worked so hard for, and when every god of Olympus was watching? There was a sudden hush over the crowd, and Meg followed the stares of the others to two figures who had appeared at the top of the stairs. Zeus and his wife Hera were a commanding sight. Zeus, a ball of blinding light with long white beard and flowing hair, with muscles so large they looked like they belonged to several men. Hera, a vision in pink, her curly hair and gown sparkling like gems. Meg felt Hercules' sharp intake of breath at the sight of his parents. This is what he'd wanted, what he had been working toward his entire life. He glanced at Meg for a split second before rushing up the stairs to see him. She said nothing as she watched him go, staring instead at his bulging calves as he raced up the steps. Only one thought came to her mind. I should have taken the man's hand. Way to go, Meg. Hercules asks if you're coming, and you just stand there like a Greek statue. Why don't you talk to him? Why didn't you say, Wonder Boy, I want you to stay? Don't become a god. Because that sounds selfish, doesn't it? And what right do I have to ask that after I almost cost him everything? She could tell them the truth. And what's that, Meg? She countered herself. How do you really feel about the boy? Meg looked at him as he reached the gates, and her heart felt a sudden pull. There was only one thing she knew to say for certain. Don't go, she whispered. He was too far away to hear her. Hercules, Meg heard Hera say as Hercules sank into his mother's open arms. We're so proud of you. Fine work, boy. Zeus punched him in the arm affectionately. His blue eyes that mirrored Hercules' own shone with pride. You've done it. You're a true hero. Meg suddenly felt Hera's eyes on her. Every other god in the joint turned to look at the single mortal among the clouds, too. Meg shifted uneasily at the sudden attention of the immortals. You were willing to give your life to rescue this young woman. Awe-coated Hera's voice. Even Meg couldn't believe that Wonder Boy had almost sacrificed himself to save her, of all people. And yet, here they both were. Don't go. Don't go. For a true hero isn't measured by the size of his strength, but by the strength of his heart, Zeus told his son as he clasped a large arm around him. Now at last, my son, you can come home. The gates of Mount Olympus opened, revealing a world beyond that Meg couldn't put into words. It was heaven, pure and simple, paradise. It was a world not meant for a mortal like her. She felt the shift as her heart, the one that she'd only just gotten used to hearing beat again, stopped suddenly at the sight of it all. Any second now, Wonder Boy would walk through those gates and never look back. She couldn't blame him. Zeus was offering him his dream come true. Immortality, family, and home. Home. That was everyone's dream, wasn't it? She never had a home of her own. Not really. For years she'd bounced from place to place, never staying long enough to even hang something on the walls. She'd never lived somewhere she longed to return to, where she felt loved, where she felt safe, a place she didn't want to leave. Well, of course, she'd felt that way once for a short while. And look how that turned out. The other gods crowded around Hercules, cheering once more for the boy who was lost and found again. When Meg heard a cry, she couldn't help turning around. The god of love, Aphrodite, a vision in purple, was being consoled by a green god wearing a hat of leaves, whom Meg didn't recognize. I can't believe we finally have our Hercules back. Aphrodite wiped away tears. I'm just so happy for this family. Hera has waited so long to see her son again. Yes, well, she could have seen him sooner, but you know Zeus. He's so big picture, said the green god, and Aphrodite looked at her strangely. Oh, don't mind me, being dour on such a happy occasion. Just a bit of gossip, I heard. Aphrodite moved in closer. Gossip away, Demeter. Demeter was the god of harvest, someone Meg's first love had always prayed to when planting crops for the coming year. She strained to hear the Zaftig god with the pink lips. Well, I heard that Hera was so inconsolable about Hercules being stolen that Zeus set out to find the boy. And he did, but once he found out the kid was mortal, he left them there. The fates predicted Zeus's son was the only one who could stop the Titans 18 years after his birth. So Zeus just waited the time out. Now he has the boy trained up and strong enough to fight future battles. Megan held sharply as Aphrodite gasped. No. He just left the child on Earth? Hera would be heartbroken to know that. Holy Zeus, was that true? Meg wondered. Demeter shrugged and half-heartedly waved a palm leaf in the air in celebration. Well, it's just a rumor, but I'll tell you something. If it were my daughter, I would never have left her sleeping in a cradle to be stolen in the first place. And I'd certainly never let her roam on Earth alone. If I knew where she was, I'd stop at nothing to get her back. Nothing. Aphrodite patted her back. We'll find Persephone, don't worry. I'm sure the girl is just wandering off in meadows and farmland again as she likes to do. Maybe, but she has her harvest duties on Earth soon, Demeter said, her eyes on Zeus, accepting praise for his son. Anyway, all I know is I won't rest until I find her. Phil rushed past the gods, separating Meg from them, with not even a greeting. He ran up the steps as fast as his small host could take him. Meg watched him distracted. She couldn't get what Demeter said out of her head. Did Hercules know his father had located him, had known exactly where he was his entire life and never came for him? Meg felt cold at the thought. She tried to shake the rumor aside, not let it get to her. She had enough to worry about, including saying goodbye to Wonder Boy in his big moment. He'd opened up a whole new way of life to her, one where sacrifice was rewarded, and people could be good, and heroes could save the world, and now she was going back to Earth alone. There was nothing waiting for her in Thebes. Not anymore. She had no one else to blame for her misfortune. What did her mother always say? Never rely on anyone but yourself. It was true. After her father had abandoned them, she had lost her mother and finally her first flame. When would she learn that love was a dangerous game that she never won? Was it any surprise she was about to lose Wonder Boy too? Meg felt tears begging to come to the surface, but she refused to give in. She had no clue what she'd do next, but for now, she could stand on this cloud and watch Hercules till he disappeared beyond Olympus's gates. Hercules was home. And she was happy for him, truly, even if she felt an urge to scream, "Don't go," once more. "Congratulations, Wonder Boy," Meg said softly, giving him one last look. "You'll make one heck of a god." She'd only made it a few steps before she felt someone grab her hand. She turned around in surprise. Hercules was somehow standing beside her. "Father, this is the moment I've always dreamed of," she heard Hercules say. But a life without Meg, even an immortal life, would be empty. He pulled her closer and stared into her eyes, making her heart quicken once more. I wish to stay on Earth with her." Her grip on his arm tightened. Had she just heard him correctly? "What? How? Are you sure?" she whispered, still not believing her ears. "I finally know where I belong," he whispered back. "And it's with you." Then suddenly he was kissing her, and she was throwing her arms around him as he lifted her high in the air. She could hear the gods cheering, and this time it wasn't just for Hercules. It was for the two of them and their love that somehow defied logic. Meg started to laugh, and then thought she might cry. She stared at his blue eyes and didn't know what to say. But that was okay. She didn't have to rush her thoughts. Now they had time. Lots of time. Wonder Boy was coming back to Earth with her, and they had a whole life ahead of them. Had something in their life finally gone right? It didn't seem possible, and yet Wonder Boy's lips on hers were proof. The gods approved. They were happy for them. They were... No. No? At first, Meg thought she'd imagined someone uttering the word and disagreeing with Hercules' wishes. But one look at Zeus's stern face, and Meg knew. The gods, all father, was putting an end to their relationship before it could ever really get started.